Ambition. It's an incredible force, isn't it? It can build empires, it can topple them, and it can carve a name into history so deep it's impossible to erase. And there's probably no one in history who wielded ambition on a bigger, more world-changing scale than Alexander the Great. So today, we're going to dive into this incredible story of conquest, of vision, and, well, of some seriously unintended consequences. But here's the thing. Before we can even really get into Alexander's story, we have to start with the huge question that kind of hangs over his entire life. How does a king become a tyrant? It's a question about that razor-thin line between greatness and just going way, way too far, a line that a lot of powerful rulers have stumbled across. And believe it or not, our story doesn't actually start with Alexander. Nope. We have to go back, way back, almost 300 years before him, to a guy who really set the template for this kind of ambition. His name was Phaedon of Argos. The famous historian Herodotus said he had the most hubris of all the Greeks. And hubris, well, for the ancient Greeks, that was the big one. It's this dangerous, arrogant pride, the idea that you're above the rules that apply to everyone else. It's a pretty heavy accusation, and it makes Phaedon the perfect archetype to start with.
So let's dig into this guy, Phaedon. What exactly made him the poster boy for a king who pushes the boundaries of his power? What did he do that would echo all the way down through Greek history?
What's so wild about Phaedon is how he grabbed power from, well, everywhere. It wasn't just about winning on the battlefield, though he did that, beating the legendary Spartans at Hyceia. He also went for cultural dominance, literally marching his army in and taking over the sacred Olympic Games. Then he asserted economic control by creating his own system of weights and measures. It was this total grip on power, military, cultural, and economic, that made Aristotle, centuries later, point to him and say, "See? That is how a legitimate king crosses the line and becomes a tyrant." Okay, so Phaedon gives us the blueprint for this kind of overreaching ambition, right? But it was Alexander's dad, Philip II of Macedon, who built the actual unstoppable machine to make it happen on a global scale. See, Philip was a genius, but not just on the battlefield. His real secret sauce was this kind of three-step plan he had. First, he tried diplomacy and marriage alliances to calm down his rivals. If that didn't work, well, he was not above a little bribery to buy people off. War was really his last resort, not his first move. And guess what? It worked. Oh, did it work? He took Macedon, which was basically seen as a backwater kingdom, and turned it into the absolute master of the Greek world. The final nail in the coffin was the Battle of Chaeronea, where he just crushed the combined armies of Athens and Thebes. So when he died, he handed his son, Alexander, a unified Greece and probably the best army the world had ever seen. So now Alexander has this incredible war machine his dad built for him, and he points it right at Persia. And this is where everything changes. This is where his ambition stops being merely human and starts to feel, well, divine. He starts to blur that line between being a king and being a god. I mean, the speed of his conquest is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around. Think about it. In 334 BCE, he crosses into Asia. Just 1 year later, he's facing the Persian king, Darius III, in person at the Battle of Issus and wins. Then, only 2 years after that, at Gaugamela, he completely shatters the last great Persian army. In just 3 major battles, the whole Persian Empire, the undisputed superpower of its day, was his for the taking. And if you want to understand just how massive this victory was, just follow the money. In the Persian capital of Susa alone, Alexander's forces captured 40,000 talents of coins. Now, a single talent was a fortune, more than a skilled worker would make in their entire life. To put that in perspective, at the absolute height of its power, the entire Athenian Empire's yearly income was about 460 talents. He now controlled wealth on a scale the Greeks couldn't even have dreamed of. And this is where things get really complicated for Alexander. It's perfectly summed up by his trip to the oracle at Siwa in Egypt. See, when he gets there, he's greeted in 2 totally different ways. To the Greeks in his army, being called son of Zeus is a massive honor, sure, but it's a heroic, metaphorical thing. But to the Egyptians, being called the son of Amun means he is a living god. He's the pharaoh. He's now stuck between these 2 worlds, these 2 cultures that just don't see kingship the same way. So he's caught between these 2 worlds, right? And this cultural clash, it sparks his craziest, most audacious idea yet. It's not enough to just rule the world he conquered anymore. No, he's going to forge a totally new one by literally fusing the cultures of Greece and Persia together. His plan was just radical. He starts integrating Persian nobles right into his army's command structure. He arranges for thousands of his Macedonian soldiers to marry Persian women in a giant ceremony. He even starts wearing Persian-style clothing and adopts their court rituals. And you have to ask yourself, why? Was this just smart politics, a way to keep a massive empire from rebelling, or was it something more? Did he genuinely believe in this vision of a new, unified world? Either way, his own Macedonian soldiers, they were not fans. And it seems like he really meant it. This wasn't just for show. There's this famous story of a banquet at a place called Opus, where Alexander stood up and offered a public prayer, not for victory, but for harmony and partnership and rule between Macedonians and Persians. He really seemed to believe this was possible. But here's the tragic thing about a vision that only exists in one person's head. What happens when that person is gone? In 323 BCE, at just 32 years old, Alexander died in Babylon, and his dream of a unified world, well, it died with him. The fallout was just instant, and it was brutal. His top generals, who became known as the Diadochi, or the successors, immediately started tearing each other apart for a piece of the pie. And look at this timeline. It's a bloodbath. They don't just fight each other. In their ruthless quest for power, they systematically murder every single member of Alexander's family, his half-brother, his young son, to make sure no true heir could ever challenge them. And that whole idea of reconciliation, his big dream of a blended empire, they threw it right out the window. Completely. Instead of building one unified Greco-Persian world, they carved up the empire into separate kingdoms for themselves, creating dynasties where a tiny Greek-speaking elite would rule over millions of non-Greeks for the next few centuries. So, okay, his political vision was a total failure, right? It fell apart spectacularly. So what is his actual legacy? Well, this is where we get to the biggest, most fascinating irony of the whole story. It's how the conquered, in a very real way, ended up conquering the conqueror. Because even though the empire itself shattered into pieces, his armies had been like this cultural tsunami. As they marched across the world, they carried Greek language, Greek art, Greek ideas, and Greek science with them. They created a new, interconnected Hellenistic world that stretched all the way from the Mediterranean to India. So his political project failed, but his cultural project, it succeeded on a scale he probably never even imagined. And this cultural power was so strong, so profound, that even centuries later, when Rome comes along and conquers these Hellenistic kingdoms, Rome is the one that gets changed. As the Roman poet Horace famously put it, captured Greece took captive her captor. Rome basically fell in love with Greek culture, its art, its philosophy, its literature, and that ensured that Alexander's accidental cultural legacy would become the foundation of Western civilization itself. Which leaves us with this one last big question. Did Alexander's ambition ultimately fail? I mean, his empire didn't last 5 minutes after he was gone. Or, by shattering the old world so completely, did he accidentally pave the way for the very world that came next? That's the enduring paradox of the man who conquered everything, only to create a legacy he never, ever intended.